Good evening, survivors. If you're hearing this, you've made it through another day, or at least part of one. That's no small thing anymore, is it? This is Beacon, broadcasting from somewhere safe, somewhere secure, somewhere that still feels like it belongs to the living. If my voice is reaching you, then you've either been resourceful, lucky, or maybe a little of both. Either way, you're still here, and that matters. Take a moment, wherever you are, to really let that sink in. Breathe it in if you can. The air might not smell like it used to, but it's still there, and it's still yours. Each breath is proof you've managed to outlast the chaos for one more moment. You've done what so many couldn't, and for what it's worth, I'm proud of you. The world out there isn't the one we knew, not anymore. It's quieter now, except for the groaning and the occasional sharp cry that carries across the ruins. The kind of sounds that don't let you sleep too deeply. The streets, once alive with laughter, arguments, and car horns, are now empty channels for the wind, just wide open reminders of everything we lost. But there's still something to be said for the silence. It gives you space to think, to listen, to feel like maybe you're the last one alive, or maybe, just maybe, that you're not. I won't lie to you, the herds are still moving. They're slow, but relentless. If you're on the eastern highways, you've probably seen them. Miles of blank faces shuffling in a direction only they understand. If you're smart, you've kept your distance. The real danger isn't just the bite, it's the way they pull you in, trap you, and turn the odds against you. It's their patience that gets you, their quiet persistence. They're a reminder that the end doesn't always come fast. Sometimes, it just creeps forward, step by step. But you know all this. You've seen it, heard it, maybe even fought it. What's more important right now is that you've survived it. You've done what it takes to make it through the kind of world most of us could never have imagined. That's why you're here, listening to me ramble on, and why I'm here, talking into this old mic, hoping my words reach someone, anyone, who needs them. Wherever you are, I hope you found somewhere safe tonight, somewhere you can at least lean back, take the weight off your feet, and let your heart slow down just a bit. If you've got walls around you, even better. If not, well, keep one eye on the dark and trust your instincts. They've brought you this far, and that's no small feat. I don't know what brought you to this moment, but I do know one thing. You've still got a spark left in you. The fact that you're here listening means you haven't given up. And if you haven't given up, then there's still a reason to keep going. We'll find that reason together. That's why I'm here, to remind you, to remind all of us, that as long as we're breathing, we're still in this fight. And if we're still in this fight, then maybe, just maybe, we can still win. The world outside. It's a strange thing, isn't it? A place that used to hum and buzz with life now feels like it's holding its breath. Every step you take out there feels heavier, like you're walking through a museum of everything that was. The streets, the buildings, the cars left sitting at odd angles, they're all frozen in time, locked in the exact moment everything fell apart. You've seen it, I know you have. The broken windows of shops that were once filled with bright lights and busy people. The empty playgrounds, swings swaying in the wind but never carrying a child. It's eerie, like the world forgot what it was supposed to be. And the quiet is the worst. It gets into your head if you let it, makes you think you're the only one left, the last heartbeat in a world gone still. But then, there are the sounds you can't ignore. The groans, the shuffling, the scrape of something unnatural against the pavement. Those sounds remind you there's still movement out there, though it's nothing you want to welcome. The herds, the stray ones, the ones you don't notice until it's almost too late. They're always there, somewhere, just beyond the edge of your awareness. And yet, somehow, we've learned to live with them. We've learned how to stay one step ahead. You've probably noticed how they move. The herds are slow, sure, but they don't stop. Not ever. They just keep going, like a tide that doesn't care what's in its way. I've watched them from a distance before. Watched the way they seem to drift, aimless, until something catches their attention. A sound, a movement, a scent. That's all it takes, and suddenly, they're focused. They're not fast, but they don't have to be. It's the weight of their numbers that does the damage. It's the way they surround you, how they don't tire or falter. They just keep coming. And then there are the ones you don't see until it's too late. The ones lurking in the shadows, hiding in the wreckage. They don't shuffle or groan as much, not until they're right on top of you. It's those quiet ones that scare me the most. They remind you how easy it is to get comfortable, to think you found a safe spot, only to have it all come crashing down. Still, the world isn't just theirs. Not yet. I've seen little signs of life pushing back against the decay. Wildflowers growing through the cracks in the asphalt. Birds building nests in the ruins of office buildings. Even the faintest trace of a campfire smell drifting on the wind. Proof that we're still out there. 2. The world might be trying to forget us, but we're not ready to let it. So when you step out there, when you walk through those empty streets and past those hollowed out buildings, remember that you're not just surviving, you're reclaiming. Every day you make it through is another small victory against the tide. The world may be holding its breath, but as long as you're moving, as long as you're fighting, you're the proof that it hasn't given up entirely. And neither should you. I've been lucky enough to receive a few survivor reports over the past week. People still leave notes in caches or scratch out messages on walls, and sometimes those words make their way to me. It's a strange thing, isn't it? How even now, with the world turned upside down, we still find ways to communicate, to reach out to each other. Those scraps of paper and hurried scribbles, they're lifelines. Proof that we're not as alone as we might feel. The first report comes from someone who signed their name as Ren. They've been traveling along the eastern outskirts, near the old highway. Ren says the area is mostly clear, but they warned of a small herd spotted moving west, not far from Birchwood. If you're in that area, you've probably already heard them. Maybe even seen the telltale signs. Scattered debris, broken fences, a strange hush that settles over everything right before they arrive. Ren didn't say how big the herd was, just that it was large enough to steer clear of. If you're nearby, keep moving, keep your distance, and don't get caught off guard. Another note came from a group calling themselves the Hollow Creek Collective. They left it in a supply drop near the Southern Railway. Their message was short and to the point. Safe route found through Maple Ridge. Herds haven't reached it yet. Maple Ridge, for those of you who don't know, is an old suburban area. Tight streets, lots of cul-de-sacs. Places like that can be tricky. They're great for hiding, sure, but also easy to get trapped in if things go sideways. If you're heading that way, take the advice, but don't let your guard down. The yet in their message is doing a lot of heavy lifting. One more came from a survivor passing through an industrial zone. They didn't leave a name, just a warning. Do not enter the warehouse near Greenpoint. It's not safe. That's all they wrote. No details, no explanation, just a stark warning. And honestly, sometimes that's enough. There are places out there that just feel wrong, aren't there? You step inside, and it's like the air shifts, pressing in on you. If someone says it's not safe, take their word for it. These reports are glimpses into the lives of people who are still out there, still navigating this broken world. Same as you. Every message is a small act of defiance, a reminder that we haven't gone completely silent yet. And for every note that reaches me, there are countless others waiting to be found. Carved into wood, scribbled on paper, scrawled on walls. Keep an eye out for them. Those words might just save your life, or at the very least, remind you that someone else is out there, facing the same darkness you are. If you've got your own message to share, your own warning or bit of hope to pass along, leave it somewhere someone might find it. A cache, a fence post, a bus stop, it doesn't matter where. Just put it out there. You never know who might see it, and you never know how much they might need it. After all, that's how we survive now, by holding on to each other, even when we can't see each other's faces. By sending our voices out into the void and trusting that someone, somewhere, is listening.
Whiskey, Oscar, Mike, Bravo, Alpha, Tango. Whiskey, Oscar, Mike, Bravo, Alpha,
want to share something with you tonight. A letter I found in one of the caches. It wasn't meant for me, not really. It wasn't even meant for a stranger. It was written by a father, and from the way his words poured out, you could tell they were meant for his child. But like so many things now, the letter ended up in someone else's hands. Mine this time. And now yours. The letter begins like this. My dearest Ellie, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I have to believe you will. Believing is all I've got left right now. I'm sorry I had to leave you behind, but you were safe where you were, and I wasn't. That's the hardest thing I've ever done. Walking away from you, knowing you were crying for me to stay. I hope someday you'll understand. I hope someday I can explain it to you myself. You can tell he's writing in the dark, maybe by candlelight. The words are shaky, hurried, but there's a rhythm to them, like he's forcing himself to stay steady. He goes on to say that he left their safe zone to look for medicine. He doesn't say what it's for, but he mentions how weak she's been lately, how hard it is for her to eat, to sleep. He describes searching through houses, stores, clinics, all empty, all looted long before he arrived. He writes about the silence in those places, how it feels heavier than the air outside. But the letter isn't just about his struggle. It's full of memories, too, little glimpses of the life they had before. He talks about taking her to the park when she was small, how she used to run so fast he could barely keep up. He writes about the time she made him a lopsided birthday cake with far too much frosting, and how it was the best thing he'd ever tasted. He even writes about her laugh, how it used to fill their home, a sound he'd give anything to hear again. Toward the end, his words become harder to read. He says he's tired. He doesn't know if he can keep going. But then he writes something that stopped me cold. I have to keep trying, Ellie, not just for you, but because of you. You're the reason I'm still here, still fighting. If I can just make it back to you with what you need, then maybe we can find a way to laugh again. The letter ends without a goodbye, just his name scribbled at the bottom. No sign of what happened after he wrote it. No way to know if he found the medicine, if he made it back, if Ellie ever got to read his words. It's a fragment, a moment frozen in time, like so many others scattered across this broken world. Why am I telling you this? Because it's letters like these that remind us why we keep going. They remind us of the people we're fighting for, the ones we've lost and the ones we're trying to protect. They remind us that even in the darkness, even when hope feels like a luxury we can't afford, it's still there. It's in the love we carry, the memories we refuse to let go of, and the small, stubborn belief that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow will be better. To the father who wrote this letter, if you're out there, I hope you found what you were looking for. And to the rest of you, wherever you are tonight, don't stop leaving these messages. Don't stop telling your stories. They matter. You matter. And someone out there is listening. Survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about staying smart. It's about using whatever you have, wherever you are, to make it through another day. Sometimes that means trusting your instincts. Other times it means knowing a few tricks that can give you an edge when the odds are stacked against you. That's what I want to talk about tonight. Things that might keep you one step ahead of the chaos out there. Let's start with something basic: fortifying your space. If you've got walls around you, whether it's a house, an old storefront, or even a shed, you need to make sure those walls work for you, not against you. If the windows are broken, cover them up, but not just with anything you can grab. Use something solid: scrap wood, metal sheets, even doors pulled off their hinges. The goal isn't just to keep things out, but to make it harder for anything outside to see or hear you. Zombies don't knock. They push, they claw, they slam against whatever stands between them and their prey. You want to make sure whatever they hit doesn't give. And don't forget the doors. Reinforce them with furniture if you can, something heavy and sturdy. But here's the thing most people overlook. Don't just block the door. Think about how you'll get out if you need to. A barricade that traps you inside is just as dangerous as the horde outside. Always leave yourself an exit, a window you can climb through, a back door you can slip out of, something that gives you an option when things go south. Now, let's talk about listening. The world may be quieter now, but there's still plenty to hear if you know what to listen for. Zombies have tells. They're not subtle, but they're not random either. If you hear soft, aimless groaning that usually means they're wandering. That's the kind of sound you can plan around. But if the groans grow louder, sharper, or you hear a kind of collective shuffling that seems to quicken, it's a sign they've caught on to something. Maybe it's you, maybe it's not. Either way, that's the sound that should put you on high alert. There's another sound you might not think about. Silence. The wrong kind of silence. If you're in an area where there should be noise, birds, the wind, maybe even the occasional creak of an old building, and suddenly it all stops, that's your signal to pay attention. It means something has changed. It means you need to be ready. And finally, let's talk about fire. Fire is a double-edged sword. It's a great way to stay warm, cook food, or even scare off animals. But it's also a beacon. The glow, the smoke, the smell, it draws attention. If you're going to use it, keep it small and controlled. Better yet, use it only when you're absolutely certain you're alone. The same goes for light in general. A flashlight is a lifesaver in the dark, but it's also a signal to anyone, or anything, that you're there. Shield it, dim it, or use it sparingly. Survival is about balance. It's about knowing when to hide and when to move, when to stay quiet and when to make noise, when to fortify and when to flee. The world we're in now doesn't forgive mistakes, but it rewards careful planning. You've made it this far, which means you're doing something right. Keep doing it. Keep thinking ahead. Keep listening, because out there, the smallest edge can mean the difference between making it through the night and becoming just another story left behind. Let's take a moment to talk about food. It's one of those things we used to take for granted, isn't it? You go to the store, grab whatever you needed, and never think twice about it. Now every bite feels like a victory. Every can of beans, every box of crackers, every dusty spice jar is a reminder that we're still holding on. Food isn't just fuel anymore. It's morale. It's a way to remind yourself that you're human, that you're more than just a machine running on survival mode. When you find something to eat, don't just shove it down and move on. Take a second. Taste it even if it's bland or stale. Think about how that food got to you, how many hands it might have passed through, how lucky you are to have it when so many don't. That moment of gratitude, even if it's just for a handful of nuts or a chunk of stale bread, can change the way you feel, can remind you that you're alive. Now, let's talk about making food stretch. If you've got a few cans of beans, some dried vegetables, or even a bit of rice, you've got the makings of a decent meal. Find yourself some clean water, boil it if you're not sure, and throw everything into a pot. Add some salt if you've got it, maybe a dash of pepper or any herbs you can scavenge. It doesn't have to be fancy, but you'd be amazed what a little seasoning can do. If you've got a protein source like some jerky or canned meat, toss that in too. What you're making isn't just food, it's comfort. It's a reminder that even now, even in the middle of all this, you can still make something good. And if you find something sweet, well, that's a treasure all on its own. A bar of chocolate, a jar of honey, even a dusty can of fruit cocktail. Those things are worth more than gold out here. Save them for when you really need a morale boost, for the nights when it feels like everything's falling apart. It's amazing how much a single spoonful of something sweet can change your whole outlook, even for just a little while. But here's the thing about food. It's not infinite. If you've been lucky enough to find a stash, don't let it lull you into a false sense of security. Ration what you've got. Think about tomorrow, the day after, and the day after that. Plan for the long haul. A feast tonight could mean hunger next week, and hunger leads to desperation. And desperation, well, we've all seen what that can do. If you're out scavenging, don't just grab what looks good. Think about what you can carry, what will last, what you can trade if you need to. Dried goods, canned food, anything with a long shelf life. That's the kind of stuff that keeps you alive. Fresh food is a gift, but it's also a clock ticking down. Use it wisely. Food isn't just about staying alive. It's about staying human. It's about keeping one small piece of the old world alive inside you. So the next time you sit down to eat, whether it's a full meal or just a handful of trail mix, don't rush it. Take your time. Savor it. Because in a world like this, every bite is a reminder that you're still here. And that's worth holding on to. Let's talk about something that doesn't get enough attention. Your mind. Survival isn't just a physical battle. It's a mental one, too, and some days that's the harder fight. Out there, it's easy to feel like the world is pressing in on you, like the weight of everything that's happened is just too much to carry. But you're not alone in feeling that. Every single one of us is fighting that same fight in our own way. The loneliness is the hardest part for most people. Creeps up on you, doesn't it? Even if you've got a group, there are moments when it feels like no one can really understand what you're going through. And if you're out there on your own, well, that feeling can get even sharper. The silence becomes your companion, and it's not a kind one. It whispers doubts, plays back every mistake you've made, reminds you of everything you've lost. But here's the thing, that silence doesn't have to own you. You can push back against it. One way is to keep your mind busy. When you're not actively surviving, scavenging, fortifying, keeping watch, try to find something else to focus on. Maybe it's fixing something that's broken, organizing your supplies, or even carving a mark into a piece of wood just to leave your own small trace on the world. Small tasks can anchor you, give you a sense of control when everything else feels out of reach. Memories can be tricky too. They're like ghosts, aren't they? Sometimes they're comforting, but other times they haunt you, showing up when you least expect them. You might think about the way things used to be, the people, the places, the routines that made up your life before all this. It's okay to feel that loss. It's okay to miss what you had, but don't let those memories trap you. Don't let them make you believe that the past was the only life worth living. You're still here, and that means there's still life worth living ahead of you. One thing that helps is finding a ritual, something that's yours, something that brings a little stability to the chaos. Maybe it's as simple as lighting a candle at the end of the day, or maybe it's a habit you brought with you from before. A few stretches in the morning, a journal entry before you sleep. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's something you can hold on to, something that reminds you of who you are and who you want to be. And don't forget the power of small joys. Even in a world like this, there are moments that can bring you back to yourself. The warmth of the sun on your face, the sound of the wind through the trees, the smell of rain. Those things are still out there, waiting for you to notice them. They don't fix everything, but they can give you a reason to take another step, to keep going. It's okay to feel broken. We all are, in one way or another. But broken doesn't mean useless. Broken things can still work. Broken people can still survive. And sometimes, broken is what lets the light in. So if you're struggling tonight, if the weight feels too heavy, just remember this. You've made it this far. That's not nothing. That's strength. And as long as you keep moving, keep trying, you've already won the hardest fight. The one to stay alive. I want to share a story with you tonight, one that was passed along to me from another survivor. It's not an easy one to hear, but it's an important one. It's about the dangers of desperation, how it clouds your judgment, makes you take risks you wouldn't normally take. Risks that can cost you everything. A small group of survivors had been holed up in a farmhouse for weeks. They were running low on food, water, and patience. The place was remote, tucked away at the end of a dirt road, but it wasn't as secure as it felt. The windows were old, the doors barely held together, and there was a barn out back that might as well have been a beacon for trouble. Still, they managed. They made it work until the day the barn caught fire. No one knows exactly how it started. Maybe it was lightning, or maybe someone got careless with a candle. All we know is that the smoke attracted attention, the kind of attention you can't afford to attract. A herd started moving toward the property. Slowly at first, but then with that eerie momentum they always seem to gather. The group knew they had to leave. They grabbed what little they could carry and made a run for it, heading toward a nearby town they'd avoided until then. It was a risk, but they didn't see another choice. The town wasn't safe. It had been overrun weeks before. The streets clogged with cars and debris, the buildings filled with the dead. But desperation whispered to them. It told them there had to be something there. A stash of supplies, a hiding place, something. They found a hardware store that looked intact and decided to take their chances. The door was locked, which they took as a good sign. They broke a window, climbed inside, and barricaded themselves in. For a while, it seemed like they'd made the right call. There was food in the break room, bottled water under the counter, even some tools they could use to defend themselves. But desperation has a way of blinding you to the things you don't want to see. In their rush to find safety, they didn't check the back rooms. They didn't notice the faint smell of decay or the way the air felt wrong, heavy. By the time they realized they weren't alone, it was too late. The infected were already inside. Quiet ones, the kind that don't shuffle or groan until they're on top of you. The group tried to fight, but in those close quarters, panic set in. Desperation turned to chaos, and chaos left no room for survival. Only one of them made it out, a young woman who left the note that made its way to me. She didn't write much, just a warning. Desperation kills. Don't let it guide you. That's the lesson here. Desperation lies. Tells you to move when you should wait, to push forward when you should hold back. Clouds your judgment, makes you see things that aren't there. Safety where there's danger, opportunity where there's only risk. If you feel it creeping in, stop. Take a breath. Look at the situation again with clear eyes. There's always another way, another choice. Desperation might feel like the loudest voice in your head, but it's not the only one. Trust yourself. Trust your instincts. They've gotten you this far, and they'll keep you alive if you let them.
Whiskey, Oscar, Mike, Bravo, Alpha, Tango. Whiskey, Oscar, Mike, Bravo, Alpha, Tango.
Stories are everywhere. Even now, in a world that feels so empty, they're still out there, waiting to be found. You can see them in the scrawls left on walls, in the belongings abandoned in the corners of rooms, in the remnants of lives that were interrupted but not forgotten. Every place you walk into is a snapshot of someone else's life, a fragment of their story frozen in time. I came across one of those stories a few weeks back. It was in an old bakery, of all places. The front was mostly intact, though the glass display cases were shattered, and the shelves had been picked clean. But in the back, behind the counter, there was something that stopped me. A table still set with 2 chairs pulled close. The plates were empty, but there were crumbs scattered across them, as if someone had been eating there recently. On the table was a notebook, its pages filled with neat handwriting. It belonged to a couple. They had barricaded themselves in the bakery, using whatever they could find: sacks of flour, overturned tables, even the heavy ovens in the back. They wrote about how they had made it their home, how they baked bread every day, not because they needed it to survive, but because it reminded them of the world before. The smell of bread baking filled the space, they said, and for a while it felt like everything outside didn't matter. Their words were filled with love, love for each other, love for the life they were trying to hold on to, love for the small moments of normalcy they had managed to create. But as the pages went on, the tone shifted. They wrote about hearing noises outside, about the barricades holding but barely, about the fear that the infected would find their way in. The last entry was short. "We don't regret staying here. We made this place ours, even if it wasn't for long. I don't know what happened to them. The barricades were still intact when I found the bakery, but the place was empty. No sign of them, no sign of struggle, just that table, still set as if they had only stepped away for a moment. It felt like walking into a memory, one that didn't belong to me, but that I couldn't help but carry with me. There are so many stories like that out there. Some are written down, others are etched into the spaces people once called home. A child's toy left on a staircase, a family portrait still hanging on a wall, a calendar with dates crossed off, the last one circled in red. They're everywhere, these glimpses of lives interrupted, and they remind us that the world wasn't always like this. They remind us of what we're trying to rebuild. If you come across one of these stories, take a moment. Read the words, touch the objects. Let yourself feel the echoes of the people who came before you. Their lives mattered. Their stories matter, and so does yours. Because someday someone might walk into the space you're in now. They might find what you've left behind, and in doing so, they'll know you were here, that you lived, that you survived, even if only for a little while. That's the power of stories. They keep us alive, even after we're gone. It's time to bring this broadcast to a close, survivors. The night has settled in, and if you've made it this far, I hope you found some measure of peace where you are, even if it's fleeting. But before we sign off, I want to leave you with a thought, something to carry with you through the darkness and into whatever tomorrow brings. Every day out here feels like a battle, I know. Sometimes it feels like we're fighting just to stand still, just to hold on to what little we have. But there's something in that struggle, something that's easy to overlook when the weight of it all bears down on you. The fact that you're still here means you've won every single battle so far. Every decision, every step, every moment of hesitation and courage. It's all added up to this one undeniable truth. You're still alive. And that means something. Think about everything it's taken to get here. Every close call, every moment when you thought it was the end, every time you looked around and didn't know how you'd make it another hour. But you did. You found a way. You pushed through even when it felt impossible. That's who you are. That's your story. And as long as you keep moving forward, that story isn't over. The world out there can feel overwhelming. The ruins, the silence, the constant threat can make you feel small, insignificant. But don't believe that. The very act of surviving, of existing in a world like this, is an act of defiance. Every breath you take is proof that you're stronger than whatever's out there trying to break you. You've already come so far. Don't stop now. I want you to take a moment wherever you are. Look around you. It doesn't matter if you're in a fortified camp, an abandoned house, or just leaning against a tree in the middle of nowhere. Look at where you are and remind yourself that you got there. You made it through another day, and that's no small thing. Let yourself feel the weight of that accomplishment, even if just for a moment. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. It always does. But you'll face them the same way you've faced everything else, with strength, with resilience, and with the knowledge that you've made it this far. The future is unwritten. Survivors. It's waiting for you, and you're the only one who can decide what your place in it will be. So keep moving, keep fighting, keep living. This is Beacon signing off for now. If you're out there, if you're listening, know that you're not alone. Somewhere in this broken world, there are others just like you, fighting their own battles, hoping for their own tomorrow. We're scattered, yes, but we're still here. And that connection, however fragile, is enough. It has to be. Good night, survivors. Stay safe. Keep your eyes open, your heart steady, and your hope alive. Until next time.